Well, our final presentation tonight is by Dr. Walid Phares. I want to say that he was the very first person that we asked to participate in this project, and he stayed with us from the very beginning as a champion of the project. We initially invited people in small clusters to try to maintain balance of viewpoints, and he promoted this with the publisher from the very first day, and thank you for that. He has a distinguished career as an academic, as you can see in your program, many years as a professor at Florida Atlantic University. He's a well-known personality now as a Middle Eastern expert for previously at MSNBC, now at Fox News. And he's published a series of books on the war of ideas. Help me in welcoming Dr. Walid Phares.
Thank you very much. First, thank you for convincing me to be part of the project and then lobbying the publisher. Actually, the publisher was very happy to see the number of colleagues who have been part of this project, and so the value is in the participants. I'd like to thank the center for hosting this important event. I'm very proud to be with esteemed colleagues. This is my first visit to the center. I hope there will be more visits in the future. As the third panelist, of course, I'm influenced by the speeches of the first two colleagues, the first two panelists, so I have modified a little bit so that I could engage in a debate and discussion already. So I'll make a few remarks, add some of my probably early reactions to some of the ideas that have been discussed, and then I'll be waiting and looking forward for the most exciting part of this, which is the engagement with the participants here. As the last one, I will actually go in a different perspective than the ambassador, who actually told us he's not going to take the eagle's view, but the horn's view. I'm going to take the shuttle's view, actually, much higher flight than the eagle, to be able to look at the big picture and serve another dimension to our panel. From that stratospheric view, I would like to focus on two things. Number one, on the battle between ideas, and then without getting into the battle of ideas, which has been significantly covered by my esteemed colleagues. I mean, the battle of Sharia, not Sharia, modernist, pluralist, etc. But place it in the context of the actual war of ideas. And these are two different notions I'd like to expand a little bit on. I personally, since the panelists have shared a little bit about their own experience, have experienced the so-called confrontation or interactions of ideas and ideologies for many, many years. All began in another spot of the world, that is Beirut. And Beirut was known to have been in the past, not that much anymore, the cultural capital of the Arab world, which means that many universities, many ideologues, many exiled ideologues fleeing many regimes in the region ended up either on these campuses of Beirut or in Café Trottoir, in the famous Hamra Street, where they, launched attacks against each other, intellectually speaking. So that period of the Lebanese debate was very important. We had, in that context, a representation of almost every single ideology that we know of in the greater Middle East and the much greater Arab and Muslim world, ranging from the then Marxist and neo-Marxist all the way to the Ba'ath, to the Arab nationalists, to all sorts of Islamists, ranging from Salafist, specifically Wahhabi, and all the way to the Khomeinists after the Islamic Revolution of Iran. And of course, you had the Western influence through those universities that brought about either an extreme conservatism or liberalism and social democrats. So that was my first stage, and obviously with years later, I found myself on 3 continents interacting with, working with intellectuals with whom I shared or didn't share ideas and views for the world. So it sort of pleased me at the time, and it gave me a lot of background in terms of trying to understand not just the making of ideas, but how these ideas are basically being used by political forces to move forward. So there is a difference between a battle of ideas, an encounter of ideas, because ideas, they float, but you have to have teams, you have to have networks to use these ideas to achieve a political agenda. And what we call today a war of ideas is both. It's really the discussion. We, as intellectuals on campuses, we discuss the value of these ideas. I mean, if jihad and ijtihad had a dialectical relationship in the 9th century, that would be a fantastic panel at Mesa. This is one thing. Or how are today's jihadist organizations being able to recruit young and much younger individuals and groups, not just in the Arab and Muslim world, but also here. within the West. And there are magnificent works been done now, and I think we're still in the very early stage of understanding these processes. So I will focus mostly on the strategies, not on the nuances of the ideas. I do begin by saying that there have been, over the past 8 years, since Eric mentioned, from 9/11 on, what has been called at the time the war on terror, and then what is being called now the war of ideas. And I know many of my colleagues may disagree even with the notion of the war of ideas, because ideas cannot fight each other. It's political forces that does that. Several major explanations of the reasons and roots of this so-called war of ideas. One is that there has been reactions to U.S. foreign policy. That is the summary of a whole body of literature that was promoted by certain quarters, that they have the whole doctrine of explaining that this whole confrontation is based on the fact that U.S. foreign policy has generated a reaction. The sum of these reactions and the continuing U.S. foreign policy or U.S. international policy are the war of ideas. And some will even widen it, including Europe, Western policies. Some even would widen it to include today Russia or India or the various conflicts occurring in the greater Middle East. That's one set. The second set has been trying to advocate the idea that the rise of radicalism, and we'll come to the definition, is basically due to economic disparities. So it's either U.S. foreign policy or economic disparities. And we can see clearly the impact of either Marxist or new Marxist explanations, which could apply anywhere around the world at any time of history, from the time history was recorded. I mean, if we focus on the economic element by itself. Or there's a third school now, which has been very active and prolific, talking about the actual theological debate. Theological debate from the two very different ends. The Islamic end that says that this is the true Islam, and then another sub-school says, no, that was the true Islam. So there's an intra-Islamic debate, or intra-Muslim debate, I should say, on the one hand, and then the other theological debate by non-Muslims who are looking at Islamic texts. And this is very now prevalent in Western Europe and in America, whereby many authors, including some of our colleagues in the book, say that the issue is really in the text, and that has to be addressed, and therefore they talk about reforms and what have you. The angle I come from is not in contradiction with any of these three angles, because I do believe that certainly any policy generates counter-policy. There's no doubt about it. And I do believe that the jihadists are reacting to U.S. foreign policies. Example of which was certainly the jihadists who fought under the Cold War, along with the United States and with the rest of NATO against the Soviet Union. They were not really following what seemed to be a rigid, ideological, anti-infidel, anti-kafir policy, because they were trained by the USA and got the support. So there is a norm of rationality even among the most extreme jihadists, because that's their political agenda.